The sound cut through the diner like a shotgun blast. For a moment, the entire room froze, forks suspended midair, conversations dying in throats. The jukebox, suddenly too loud against the silence. Sarah stood with her head turned to the side, coffee pot still gripped in her trembling hand, a red handprint blooming across her cheek like a brand. Sheriff Dixon didn't lower his hand immediately. He let it hang there, fingers still curled from the impact, his jaw set in that expression of righteous authority he'd perfected over 23 years, wearing the badge. "When I ask for something," he said, voice calm as Sunday morning, "I expect it done right." The coffee had been hot, not scalding. Sarah was too careful for that, but hot enough that Dixon had made a show of pushing the cup away, loud enough for his deputies at the corner booth to hear, hot enough to justify what came next. Sarah's face had gone white beneath the red. She opened her mouth not to speak, but because she'd forgotten how to close it. Her eyes found the floor. "Yes, sir," she whispered. "I'll get you a fresh cup. See that you do." The room exhaled. Conversations resumed like nothing had carved a hole in the air. The deputies went back to their eggs. A trucker 2 booths down signaled for his check. The cook's face appeared briefly in the kitchen window, then disappeared. Business as usual at Mel's Diner, Route 40, population, people who knew when to look away. But in the back corner, in the booth, everyone avoided because the vinyl was split and it caught the highway draft. Someone wasn't looking away. Marcus Webb sat with his hands flat on the table, his untouched burger growing cold, his leather cut worn soft from a decade of road miles absorbing the fluorescent light like a black hole. The patches told a story most people in this town couldn't read. Nomad. California. A bottom rocker that said property of nobody. He'd been in town 3 days, passing through like always. The motel was cheap, the diner was open late, and he'd learned a long time ago that staying invisible meant staying alive. But some things you can't unsee. Sarah returned with the fresh coffee, hand shaking so badly the cup rattled against the saucer. Dixon didn't look at her. Didn't need to. His deputies laughed at something one of them said, and the sound was permission, tacit approval that whatever had just happened was already forgotten, already justified, already buried under the weight of a badge and the last name that went back 4 generations in this county. Marcus watched Sarah retreat behind the counter, watched her set the pot down with both hands, watched her touch her cheek once, quickly, like she was checking to make sure her face was still there. She caught him looking. For half a heartbeat their eyes met hers, wide and wet and full of something that looked like apology, like she was sorry he had to witness it. Then she looked away, wiped her hands on her apron, and disappeared into the kitchen. Marcus had been in enough towns to know how this worked. You keep your head down. You finish your meal. You pay your tab and you ride out before sunrise and you let other people's problems stay. Other people's problems. That's how you survive when you've got a record. When you've got club business 3 states over, when you've made a life out of being nowhere anyone expects. He'd learned that lesson in blood and broken bones and brothers buried too young. But sitting in that booth listening to Dixon laugh about something while Sarah scrubbed coffee stains that would never come out of the counter, Marcus felt something shift in his chest, something old and rusted and dangerous, like a lock breaking open. He'd spent 10 years running from who he used to be. The anger, the violence, the version of himself that saw injustice and answered it with his fists because words had never saved anyone, because the system protected its own, because sometimes the only language power understood was pain. He'd gotten clean, found the club, found brothers who knew how to channel rage into something that resembled purpose, learned that real strength wasn't throwing the first punch, it was knowing when not to. But watching that room pretend nothing had happened, watching good people choose blindness because it was easier, watching Sarah's hand shake as she refilled sugar dispensers like her face wasn't still burning, Marcus realized something that made his blood run cold. If he did nothing, he became part of this, not a witness, an accomplice. The thought settled into his bones like a debt coming due. He looked at the sheriff with the easy way. Dixon leaned back in his booth, at the gold wedding band catching the light, at the campaign poster on the wall behind him promising safety, integrity, trust, and Marcus understood that this wasn't the first time, wouldn't be the last, that this was a system refined over years, protected by silence and fear and the terrible gravity of power that goes unchecked. Sarah emerged from the kitchen with a tray of pies, moving carefully, keeping her head down. Marcus made his decision. He didn't know what it would cost yet, didn't know how deep the rot went or how far he'd have to dig to hit bottom. Didn't know if this town would bury him for asking questions nobody wanted answered, but he knew what happened to men who saw evil and called it normal. They became it. In Marcus Webb had spent too many years crawling out of that darkness to go back now, not for comfort, not for safety, not even for survival. He caught Sarah's eye across the diner. This time, he didn't look away. Morning came through the motel window like an accusation. Marcus had been awake for hours sitting on the edge of the bed, watching the highway through cracked blinds. His Harley sat in the parking lot below, gassed up and ready. The smart play was obvious. Pack up, roll out, be 3 counties gone by noon. Instead, he walked back to the diner. The breakfast rush was winding down, truckers paying their tabs, locals lingering over coffee and conversation. Sarah moved between tables with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd learned to take up as little space as possible. The bruise on her cheek had darkened overnight, purple-black and impossible to hide. Nobody mentioned it. Marcus took the same booth as last night. When Sarah approached with the coffee pot, he saw her hesitate a fractional pause, like she was calculating whether serving him was worth whatever came next. "Just coffee," he said quietly, "and whatever you recommend." Something flickered in her expression, not quite trust, but close. "Pancakes are good today." "Pancakes, it is." She poured his coffee with steady hands this time, and he noticed the ring of lighter skin on her left hand where a wedding band used to be. Noticed the way she angled her body to keep the bruised side of her face turned away from the other customers. Noticed the careful neutrality in her voice, the kind that came from years of practice. When she brought his food, Marcus spoke without looking up. "How long's it been going on?" Sarah's hand tightened on the plate. For a moment he thought she might walk away. Instead, she set down his pancakes with deliberate care and said very softly, "I don't know what you mean." "Yeah, you do." She glanced toward the kitchen, then back, her voice dropped to barely a whisper. "You should leave this alone." "Can't do that." "Why not? Everyone else does." Marcus met her eyes then. "That's why." Sarah's jaw tightened. For just a second, he saw something fierce underneath all that careful nothing, a spark of anger that hadn't quite been extinguished. Then it was gone, replaced by the tired resignation of someone who'd learned that fighting back only made things worse. "He's the sheriff," she said. "His father was sheriff, his grandfather." "You see where this is going?" "I see it." "Then you understand there's nothing to be done. This is his town. These are his people." She straightened, smoothing her apron. "I appreciate your concern, but I'm handling it. By letting him hit you." The words came out harder than he intended. Sarah flinched and Marcus immediately regretted his tone. "I'm sorry," he said. "That wasn't." "You're right." Sarah's voice had gone flat. "That's exactly what I'm doing. Because the last waitress who complained, she lost her job, couldn't find work anywhere in the county, and her husband left her because everyone said she must have been asking for it. The woman before that, her car got vandalized until she moved away. So yes, I'm letting him hit me, because at least I still have a paycheck. At least I can still feed my daughter." Marcus felt something crack open in his chest. Daughter. Sarah must have seen it in his face because she shook her head. "Don't. Whatever you're thinking, don't. I can't afford your help." She walked away before he could respond. Marcus sat with his cooling pancakes, watching the diner through new eyes. The easy laughter from the corner booth deputies who'd seen what happened and done nothing. The cook who'd looked away. The regular customers who came in, day after day, and pretended not to notice the rotating bruises on Sarah's arms, her wrists, the careful way she moved, like someone expecting the next blow. A whole town choosing blindness. He was finishing his coffee when the door opened and 3 men walked in. The one in front wore the same uniform as last night, but the badge on his chest said deputy, not sheriff. He scanned the diner like he was looking for something specific. His eyes landed on Marcus. The deputy approached slowly, hand resting on his belt near his weapon. "Morning. Don't believe I've seen you around before. Just passing through. Uh-huh. How long you planning on passing?" Marcus kept his voice level. "Haven't decided yet." "Well?" The deputy smiled without warmth. "Might want to decide soon. We're a quiet town. Like to keep it that way." He let his gaze drop to Marcus's cut, taking in the patches with obvious disdain. "Understand." Loud and clear. The deputy lingered a moment longer, a show of dominance, a reminder of who held power here, then turned and left, his boots loud on the linoleum. Sarah was watching from behind the counter, her face carefully blank. Marcus left cash on the table and walked out. But he didn't pack. Didn't roll out. Instead, he spent the afternoon in the public library, a small brick building on Main Street with a volunteer librarian who seemed delighted to have a visitor. The newspaper archives went back decades, stored on microfilm that required a machine older than Marcus. He started with the present and worked backward. 6 months ago, Sheriff Dixon commended for community outreach. A year ago, local law enforcement praised for low crime rates. 2 years ago, Dixon dynasty continues, 3rd generation, sheriff sworn in. Nothing about complaints, nothing about investigations. The Dixons had been the law in this county for 70 years, and the newspapers read like campaign literature. But Marcus had learned to read between the lines. He found them in the back page's brief mentions, easy to miss. A domestic disturbance call, no arrests made. A woman's complaint withdrawn before investigation. A pattern of incidents at the diner, all dismissed as accidents or misunderstandings. And then, 3 years back, a name that made Marcus stop. Rachel Holbrook, former employee of Mel's Diner, filed a formal complaint against Sheriff Thomas Dixon for assault and harassment. Case dismissed due to lack of evidence. Marcus wrote down the name. By the time he left the library, the sun was setting. His phone buzzed a text from his club president, asking when he'd be back in California. Marcus stared at the message for a long moment, then pocketed the phone without responding. He rode to the address he'd found in the phone. Book a small house on the edge of town. Paint peeling, yard overgrown. Rachel Holbrook's name was still on the mailbox, but when he knocked, no one answered. A neighbor called out from the next yard over. "She don't live there no more. Left town couple years back." "You know where she went?" The neighbor, an elderly woman with suspicious eyes, crossed her arms. "Who's asking?" "Someone who wants to help." "Help?" She spat the word like poison. "That what you boys call it now?" She started to turn away, then stopped. Rachel tried to help herself. "Look where it got her. You want my advice? Keep riding, son. Ain't nothing here worth dying for." Marcus stood in the failing light, looking at the empty house, and felt the clock start ticking. Sarah had a daughter. Rachel Holbrook had tried to speak up and been driven out. Dixon had been wearing a badge for 23 years. How many others? How many women who'd learned that silence was survival? If you've ever seen power abuse silence, you know that evil isn't loud. It's quiet. It's normal. It's the way things have always been. And anyone who questions it must be the problem, not the system that protects monsters because they wear the right uniform, bear the right name, wield the right kind of violence. Marcus had spent his life on the outside of that system, had seen it break people, bury bodies, rewrite history, had learned that justice was something you took, not something you were given. But he'd also learned that revenge wasn't the answer. That becoming the thing you hated didn't fix anything, so what did that leave? He thought about Sarah's daughter, about the next waitress, about all the women who would come after, who would learn to look away from their own bruises because fighting back cost too much. Marcus started his bike and rode back toward the motel. Tomorrow, he'd have to make a choice that couldn't be unmade. Tonight, he had to decide if he was ready for the cost. The knock came at 2 a.m. Marcus was already awake, sitting in the dark, when the sound rattled through the motel room. 3 sharp raps, authoritative and deliberate, the knock of someone who expected the door to open. He didn't move. "Mr. Webb." Sheriff Dixon's voice, smooth as silk. "I know you're in there. Saw your bike in the lot. Figured we should have a conversation." Marcus stood slowly, approached the door, but didn't open it. "It's late. Won't take long. Just want to clear up a misunderstanding." Through the people, Marcus could see Dixon alone. No deputies, no backup. Just a man in a sheriff's uniform, hands visible and empty. The performance of reason. Marcus opened the door. Dixon smiled, the kind that didn't reach his eyes. "Mind if I come in?" "Rather you didn't." "That's fine. We can talk out here." Dixon leaned against the railing, casual. "You've been asking questions around town. About me, specifically. Now, I'm a public servant. Scrutiny comes with the territory. But when an outsider with your background starts digging into my business, people get nervous." "My background? Come on, Marcus, you think I don't know how to run a plate?" "Assault charges in 16, affiliated with a known criminal organization. History of violence." Dixon's smile widened. "You're exactly the kind of element we work hard to keep out of communities like this." Marcus kept his expression neutral. "Those charges were dropped." "Sure they were. But we both know how that works, don't we? System's not perfect. Sometimes dangerous men slip through the cracks." Dixon straightened. "I'm here as a courtesy. Professional to professional. You leave tomorrow morning, I forget I ever saw you. Clean slate. And if I don't, then I remember everything. And I start wondering what a man like you is really doing in my town. Start thinking, maybe I should search that motel room. Maybe take a closer look at that bike. Maybe find some reason, official reason, to keep you here while we sort things out." The threat was clear. Manufactured charges, evidence planted, the full weight of the law used as a weapon. Marcus had seen this play before, had lived it. "This about Sarah?" he asked quietly. Something flickered behind Dixon's eyes, brief, cold, dangerous. Then the smile returned. "Sarah's a good employee. Little clumsy sometimes, bruises easing, but we take care of our own here. Don't need outsiders getting the wrong idea." "She tell you I've been asking questions?" "Didn't have to. Small town. People talk." Dixon stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Here's what I know about men like you, Marcus. You think you're righteous, think you see something wrong, and you can fix it with your fists or your bike or whatever code you bikers live by. But you're just another thug with a savior complex. And this," he gestured at the town around them, "this isn't your fight. Maybe it is. Then you're a fool." Dixon's smile vanished. "You have no idea what you're stepping into. This town has an order, has rules, has a way of handling things that's worked for generations. You don't get to ride in here and burn it all down because you saw something that offended your delicate sensibilities. Saw a man hit a woman who couldn't hit back. You saw a disciplinary matter between an employer and an employee who keeps making mistakes. That what you call it." Dixon's jaw tightened. "Last chance, Marcus. Pack your shit. Ride out. Go back to California and forget you ever stopped here." "Can't do that." "Why not?" Marcus held the sheriff's gaze. "Because then I'd be you." For a moment, Dixon just stared, and Marcus saw the truth beneath the charm, beneath the badge, beneath the dynasty. Saw a man who'd learned young that power was permission, that authority was armor, that as long as you had the right last name and the right uniform, you could do anything and call it justice. "You just made a mistake," Dixon said softly. "A fatal one." He turned and walked to his cruiser, leaving Marcus standing in the doorway. The threat hung in the air like smoke. Morning came with consequences. Marcus found his bike vandalized, deep scratches in the paint, slashed seat, sugar in the gas tank. Professional work, careful not to leave evidence, but clear in its message. The motel manager apologized, but suggested Marcus might want to find somewhere else to stay. "Nothing personal," he said, not meeting Marcus's eyes. "But the sheriff's been asking around about you, and I can't afford trouble." Marcus packed his bag and walked to the diner. Sarah saw him coming, and her face went pale. She met him at the door, blocking his entry, her voice urgent and low. "You need to leave, now. I know what he did, what he's been doing. And what are you going to do about it? You going to arrest him? You got jurisdiction here? You got evidence?" Her voice cracked. "All you've got is a death wish, and I won't be responsible for that." "This isn't about you being responsible. Yes, it is. Sarah grabbed his arm and he felt her shaking. He came by my house last night, while my daughter was sleeping. Didn't do anything, didn't say anything, just knocked on the door and smiled at me when I answered. That's all. Just a reminder that he knows where I live, that he can get to her. Marcus felt ice in his veins. So please, Sarah whispered, just go. I'll be fine. I've survived this long, I'll keep surviving. But I can't. Her voice broke. I can't watch someone else get destroyed because they tried to help me. In the diner window, Marcus could see Dixon sitting in his usual booth, watching them with that same cold smile. Sarah followed his gaze. He's untouchable. His family built this town. Half the county works for him or owes him favors. The deputies are his cousins. The judge goes to his church. Even if you somehow got proof, who would you take it to? Marcus wanted to argue. Wanted to tell her there was always a way, always a path to justice, but he lived long enough to know that wasn't true. Sometimes the system wasn't broken, sometimes it was working exactly as designed, protecting its own, grinding down anyone who challenged it, surviving through patience and power and the terrible inertia of the way things have always been. He was about to turn away when he noticed something. Sarah's left hand, the one gripping his arm, had dirt under the fingernails. Fresh dirt, dark and damp, and on her wrist, just visible beneath her sleeve, a new bruise in the shape of fingers. She saw him notice and quickly pulled her hand back. What happened to your wrist? Marcus asked quietly. Nothing. I fell. Sarah, I said I fell. But her eyes slid past him, toward the window, toward Dixon, toward the patrol car parked outside. Marcus moved closer, saw the exhaustion deeper than a few sleepless nights, saw the way she held herself like someone carrying weight no one else could see, saw the desperation underneath the resignation. Where's your daughter now? He asked. Sarah's expression shattered for just a moment. School. She's safe at school. And after school. I'll figure it out. I always do. But the tremor in her voice said otherwise. Marcus made a decision. I need you to trust me. I can't. Not with everything. Just this, has anyone else ever tried to help you? Before Rachel, I mean. Anyone official? Sarah hesitated, then nodded slowly. County social worker, 3 years ago. Rachel told her what was happening. She came by, asked questions, took notes. Her laugh was bitter. Week later, she apologized, said after reviewing the evidence, there was nothing to substantiate the claims. Case closed. You remember her name? Why does it matter? She's not going to. Her name's Sarah. Jennifer Martinez. But she doesn't work for the county anymore. Left about 2 years ago. Sarah's eyes widened slightly. Wait, do you think she... I think people don't usually quit jobs unless they have a reason. For the first time, Marcus saw something like hope flicker in Sarah's expression. Then it died, replaced by fear. Even if she knows something, even if she'd talk to you, it won't matter. Dixon's protected. He's always protected. Maybe, Marcus said, but I'm tired of watching protected people hurt the ones who aren't. He turned to go, but Sarah caught his sleeve. Why are you doing this? She asked. You don't know me. This isn't your town. You could just leave. Why didn't you leave? Marcus thought about all the times he had left, all the towns he'd ridden through, all the injustices he'd witnessed and ignored, because they weren't his problem, because he'd paid his dues, because someone else would surely step up. All the women who'd learned to survive instead of fight because men like him kept writing. Because leaving makes me part of it, he said. Sarah studied his face for a long moment. Then she reached into her apron and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. She's in Riverside, about 40 miles west. Works at a legal aid clinic. Marcus took the paper. Their eyes met. Be careful, Sarah whispered. Please. He nodded and walked away. Behind him, through the diner window, Sheriff Dixon raised his coffee cup in a mock salute. The game had changed. Now it was about who would blink first. Jennifer Martinez worked out of a converted storefront on Riverside's main street, wedged between a laundromat and a bodega. The sign in the window read, Free, legal aid walk-ins, welcome. Marcus pushed through the door into a cramped office that smelled of coffee and old files. A woman in her 40s looked up from a desk buried under paperwork, dark hair pulled back, reading glasses perched on her nose, exhaustion written in the lines around her eyes. Help you, Jennifer Martinez? Her expression shifted immediately, professional warmth replaced by practiced caution. Depends. Who's asking? Marcus Webb. I want to talk about Sarah Chen and a sheriff in your old county. Jennifer's hand moved toward the phone. I don't know what you're talking about. Yeah, you do. For a long moment, they stared at each other. Then Jennifer's shoulders sagged. She removed her glasses, rubbed her eyes. You law enforcement? No. Press? No. Then what are you? Someone who watched Thomas Dixon slap a waitress and get away with it. Jennifer's jaw tightened. She stood, walked to the door, locked it, flipped the sign to closed. When she turned back, the exhaustion had given way to something harder. I'm going to tell you something, she said, and then you're going to leave and forget we ever talked. Understood? Marcus nodded. Jennifer poured herself coffee from a pot that looked hours old and didn't offer him any. 3 years ago, I was young and idealistic and stupid. Thought the system worked if you just documented everything correctly, followed the proper channels. Rachel Holbrook came to me with a complaint against Sheriff Dixon, showed me bruises, gave me dates and times, had another witness, Sarah Chen. What happened? I did my job, interviewed witnesses, took photographs, filed a formal report with my supervisor. Jennifer's voice went flat. Report disappeared. My supervisor told me I'd misunderstood the situation, that Dixon was a respected member of the community, that making unfounded accusations could end my career. I pushed back, started documenting everything, building a case that couldn't be ignored. And I woke up one morning to find my car vandalized. Dead rat on my porch. Anonymous calls at 3 a.m. My supervisor suggested I take a leave of absence for my own mental health. When I refused, they found a reason to audit my cases, discovered irregularities in my documentation, suspended me pending investigation. Marcus felt something cold settle in his gut. The investigation cleared me eventually, Jennifer continued. But the message was clear, drop it or lose everything. So I dropped it, finished out my contract, took a job here, and tried to forget. She met his eyes. You want to know the worst part? It worked. Dixon's still sheriff. Rachel's gone. Sarah's still there. And I'm here telling myself I did what I could, that you can't fight the system alone. You're not alone, Marcus said quietly. Jennifer laughed, bitter. What are you? One biker with a conscience? That's not an army. That's a suicide run. Maybe. But I've got something you didn't. What's that? Nothing to lose. Marcus leaned forward. You documented everything. You took photographs. Where is it? The original evidence. Jennifer's eyes widened. That's not. Is it here? She didn't answer, but her gaze flicked toward a filing cabinet in the corner. You kept it, Marcus said. Even after everything, you kept it. Insurance, Jennifer whispered. In case he ever came after me. Proof that I wasn't crazy, that I didn't make it up. She shook her head violently. But I'm not giving it to you. That file is the only thing keeping me safe. If Dixon found out I still had evidence, he's already threatening her daughter. The words hung in the air. Jennifer went very still. What? Showed up at Sarah's house last night, while her kid was sleeping. Didn't do anything except smile. Let her know he could get to her whenever he wanted. Jesus. Jennifer sat down hard. He's escalating, which means we're running out of time. We? Jennifer looked at him. There is no we. I gave you information. That's all I can do. You gave me confirmation. But confirmation doesn't mean anything without proof. Marcus stood. I'm not asking you to do this for me. I'm asking you to do it for Sarah. For Rachel. For whoever comes after them. And what exactly do you think you're going to do with this evidence? Take it to the county sheriff's department that Dixon runs? The prosecutor who plays golf with his father? The newspaper that's been printing puff pieces about the Dixon family for 70 years? Marcus had been thinking about that, had spent the long ride to Riverside, turning over options, running scenarios, hitting walls. Jennifer was right. The local system was closed, contaminated, built to protect itself, but there were other systems. State police, Marcus said. FBI if it's a civil rights violation. Federal prosecutors who don't owe Dixon favors. You think they'll care? One small-town sheriff with a history of domestic complaints that never went anywhere? Jennifer shook her head. You need a pattern. You need multiple victims willing to testify. You need someone inside the department to flip. I need to start somewhere. They stared at each other. Jennifer walked to the filing cabinet, unlocked it, pulled out a folder, thick, stuffed with papers and photographs. She held it against her chest like a shield. If I give you this, she said, and it doesn't work, if he finds out and comes after me, after my family, then I'll answer for it. That's not good enough. It's all I've got. Jennifer's hands trembled. I became a social worker because I thought I could help people. Thought I could make a difference in a system that grinds people down. But this job? She gestured at the office around them. This is what you get when you try to be righteous. You end up broke, working out of a strip mall, helping people who can't pay you while the bastards who should be in prison run counties. So help me change that. One case won't change anything. Maybe not, but it's one case more than yesterday. Jennifer looked down at the folder. Marcus could see the war happening behind her eyes. The fear against the fury, the self-preservation against the memory of Rachel's bruises, Sarah's exhaustion, all the women who'd learned to be quiet. Finally, she handed him the folder. There are photographs in there, she said quietly. Statements, documentation of prior complaints that were dismissed, timeline of incidents, everything I had 3 years ago. She met his eyes. If this blows back on me, it won't. You can't promise that. No, Marcus agreed. But I can promise I'll try. Jennifer nodded slowly. State Police Barracks is in Fairmont. Ask for Sergeant Rita Owens. She's less susceptible to local politics. Don't mention my name unless you have to. Marcus took the folder. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. You're about to make yourself the most wanted man in that county. She unlocked the door, held it open. And Marcus, whatever you think is going to happen when you walk into that state police barracks, it's going to be worse. These people don't like being told their system is broken. They'll fight you every step. I know, do you? Jennifer's voice dropped. Because I fought. And I lost. And I'm one of the lucky ones because I got to walk away with just my career destroyed. You keep pushing this, you might not get that option. Marcus thought about Sarah's daughter, about the next waitress, about all the silence that had been bought with fear and power and the terrible patience of evil that knew how to wait. Then I better make it count, he said. The ride back to Sarah's town felt longer than 40 miles. Marcus had the folder in his saddlebag, secured in a waterproof case like it was nitroglycerin, which, in a way, it was explosive enough to blow apart a dynasty if handled right, deadly enough to destroy him if it went wrong. He'd made a choice. The irreversible kind. Now he had to live with it. He pulled into the diner parking lot just as the evening shift was starting. Through the window he could see Sarah moving between tables, her bruised face now a fact the regular customers had absorbed and dismissed. Marcus didn't go inside. Instead, he rode to the state police barracks in Fairmont, a low brick building, with American flags and official vehicles out front, the kind of place that represented the system working, the law applied fairly, justice without corruption. He wanted to believe that. Had to believe it, or none of this mattered. Sergeant Rita Owens was a woman in her 50s with iron gray hair and the kind of eyes that had seen enough bullshit to fill a career. She listened to Marcus's story without interrupting, examined the folder with professional detachment, and then leaned back in her chair. You know what you're asking me to do, she said. Investigate a sheriff. Not just a sheriff, the Dixon family. Do you have any idea how much political capital that represents? She tapped the folder. This is good documentation, but it's 3 years old. The witness Rachel Holbrook is gone. The social worker who compiled it doesn't work for the county anymore, and your current complainant Sarah Chen hasn't filed a formal complaint. Because she's terrified. I understand that. But legally, you've got evidence of a pattern of abuse by a law enforcement officer. Isn't that enough to at least open an investigation? Owen studied him for a long moment. You former military? The question caught him off guard. No. Why? Because you've got that look. The one that says you've seen things go wrong and you're still naive enough to think you can fix them. She sighed. I'll be honest with you, Mr. Webb. If I open this investigation, it's going to get ugly. Dixon will lawyer up. His family will close ranks. Every deputy in that department will suddenly develop amnesia. The county prosecutor will scream political witch hunt, and the press will eat it up. So you're saying no. I'm saying it's complicated. Owens opened the folder again, flipped through the photographs, images of bruises, documentation of incidents, statements from Rachel that had been dismissed as unreliable. But I'm also saying I didn't become a state trooper to protect corrupt sheriffs. Marcus felt something unclench in his chest. I'll need Sarah Chen to make a formal statement, Owen said, on the record. And I'll need to interview her daughter, make sure there's no immediate danger. Can you make that happen? I can try. Then try, because without a current complainant, this folder is just historical documentation, compelling but not actionable. She handed the folder back. And, Mr. Webb, if you're going to convince Sarah to come forward, you better be damn sure you can protect her. Because once this goes official, Dixon will know someone tough, and he's going to come looking. Marcus took the folder. I'll protect her. With what? Good intentions and a motorcycle. Owens shook her head. Look, I admire what you're trying to do, but this isn't a movie. You don't ride in, expose the corruption, and ride off into the sunset. Real justice is slow and bureaucratic and messy, and it requires the people who've been hurt to be willing to stand up and be counted, which is asking victims to re-traumatize themselves for a system that's already failed them once. So what do? You give Sarah the choice. No pressure, no guilt. You tell her what's required, what it'll cost, and you let her decide if it's worth it. Owen stood. And if she says yes, you call me immediately. I'll have a protective detail at her house within the hour. Marcus nodded and turned to leave. Webb? He stopped. There's something else you should know, Owen said quietly. I checked you out while you were riding over here. Your record. Your club affiliation. You're not exactly a Boy Scout. No, Marcus agreed. I'm not. So why are you really doing this? It was the same question Sarah had asked. The same question Marcus had been asking himself. He thought about the man he used to be, the violence, the rage, the certainty that the only way to fight power was with more power. Thought about the brothers he'd lost to that philosophy, the wreckage he'd left behind. Thought about sitting in that diner booth, watching a woman get hit and feeling the old fury rise up like muscle memory, and realizing that this time maybe for the first time he could channel it into something that wasn't just destruction. Because someone has to, he said finally, and I'm tired of it not being me. Owens held his gaze for a moment, then nodded. Get me that statement. Marcus walked out into the fading light, the folder heavy in his hands. One choice left, Sarah's. And whatever she decided, Marcus knew his life had already changed. The clock couldn't be turned back. The line had been crossed. Now it was just a matter of seeing it through, or dying in the attempt. Sarah's house was a small rental on the edge of town with a chain-link fence and a yard that needed mowing. A rusted swing set sat unused in the back. Lights were on in the kitchen. Marcus knocked softly. The door opened a crack, chain still attached. Sarah's face appeared weary and exhausted. When she saw him, something between relief and terror crossed her expression. What are you doing here? She whispered. I need to talk to you. It's not safe, I know. That's why I need to talk. She hesitated, then closed the door long enough to remove the chain. Marcus stepped inside. The house was neat, despite its aged children's drawings on the fridge, a backpack by the door. the lived-in warmth of a place where someone was trying very hard to make a home out of nothing. A girl of maybe 7 sat at the kitchen table working on homework. She looked up when Marcus entered, eyes going wide. "It's okay, baby," Sarah said quickly. "This is a friend. Go finish your math in your room, okay?" The girl gathered her papers without argument, but Marcus saw her glance at her mother's bruised face, saw the way she'd learned not to ask questions. When she was gone, Sarah turned to Marcus. "You shouldn't be here. I went to Fairmont, talked to a state police sergeant." Sarah went very still. "Why would you do that?" Marcus set the folder on the table. "Because there's a way out of this, but it requires you to make a choice." "What kind of choice?" "The kind where you tell the truth and let the system do its job." Sarah's laugh was hollow. "The system, right. The same system that dismissed Rachel's complaint? That let Dixon's supervisor audit the social worker until she quit? That's been protecting him for 23 years? She shook her head. "That system doesn't work for people like me." "Maybe not. But there's a state police sergeant who's willing to try if you make a formal statement." "And then what? Dixon gets investigated, maybe suspended. His lawyers tie it up in court for years while I lose my job, get blacklisted from every diner in the county, and try to explain to my daughter why we're living in a shelter." Marcus couldn't argue with that. Everything she said was possible, likely even. "Or," Sarah continued, her voice breaking, "Dixon decides the investigation is my fault, decides to send a message, and my daughter—" She pressed her hand over her mouth, fighting tears. "I can't risk her. I won't." "I know." "Then why are you here?" Marcus looked at the drawings on the fridge, thick figures holding hands. A house with smoke curling from the chimney, the simple art of a child who didn't yet know how cruel the world could be. "Because she's watching," he said quietly. "Your daughter. She's learning right now what to do when someone hurts you, whether to speak up or stay quiet, whether to fight back or accept it." He met Sarah's eyes. "And whatever you choose, that's the lesson she'll carry." Sarah's face crumpled. "That's not fair." "No, none of this is fair. I'm not brave like you think I am. I'm not some hero who can stand up to power and change the world. I'm just—" Her voice broke. "I'm just trying to survive." "I know," Marcus said again. "And if you decide that survival means staying quiet, I'll understand. I'll leave tonight. You'll never hear from me again." "And the folder?" "Goes to the state police anyway. Maybe it's enough. Maybe it's not. But at least someone will know." Sarah looked at the folder like it was a bomb. "Even if I wanted to help, I don't have proof. It's my word against his. The bruises could be from anything. The harassment, the threats, it's all he said, she said. Jennifer Martinez documented everything. Rachel gave testimony. There's a pattern. But they're gone. I'm alone. Not anymore." The voice came from the doorway. Sarah spun around. Standing in the entrance was a woman in her 60s, weathered face, calloused hands, the kind of quiet strength that came from decades of hard living. She wore a diner uniform from a different restaurant 20 miles over. "Betty?" Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. Heard through the grapevine, someone was finally asking questions about Dixon. Betty stepped inside, closed the door behind her. "Figured it was time I stopped being a coward." "You worked at Mel's," Marcus said. 10 years ago, before Sarah, before Rachel." Betty's jaw tightened. "Dixon broke my wrist when I told him to keep his hands to himself. Told everyone I fell on the ice. I was too scared to say different." Sarah was crying now. "Betty, you don't have to." "Yeah, I do. Should have done it years ago." Betty looked at Marcus. "You the one stirring this up?" "I'm the one asking questions." "Good. About damn time." She pulled out a chair, sat down heavily. "I'll give a statement. Tell them everything. Won't bring back the years I lost being afraid, but maybe it'll help Sarah, help the next girl." Sarah looked between them, something like hope warring with terror in her expression. A knock at the door made them all freeze. Marcus moved first, positioning himself between Sarah and the entrance. Through the window, he could see a figure on the porch, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing leather. Not Dixon. Marcus opened the door. The man standing there was older than Marcus, 60-something, with gray in his beard and patches on his cut that told their own story. California chapter, original member, the kind of brother who'd seen the club evolve from chaos to something that resembled order. "Razor," Marcus said, stunned. "What are you? Got your location from your phone. Figured I'd ride out, see what kind of trouble you'd found." Razor's eyes moved past Marcus to Sarah and Betty. "Looks like the serious kind. I didn't ask for backup. Didn't need to." Razor stepped inside, and Marcus saw 3 more bikes pull up outside, brothers he recognized. Good men who understood that the club code wasn't about violence anymore. It was about protection, family, standing between the innocent and the wolves. Sarah was staring at the bikers with wide eyes. "It's okay," Marcus said quietly. "They're here to help." "Help how?" Razor pulled out his phone, scrolled through something, then showed it to Marcus. A news article from 2 years ago. Hell's Angels provide security for domestic violence shelter after threats. "We've done this before," Razor said. "System moves slow. Bad men move fast. Sometimes people need protection while justice figures itself out." Marcus looked at his brothers, then at Sarah. "If you make a statement, we'll make sure Dixon can't get to you or your daughter. 24-hour watch until the state police can act. No one gets through us." "Why would you do that?" Sarah whispered. "Because that's the code," Razor said simply. "Protect those who can't protect themselves. Stand between the innocent and the predators. Be better than the monsters who wear badges and pretend they're righteous." Betty stood up. "I'm in, whatever you need." Sarah looked at her daughter's room, where the light still shone under the door. At the drawings on the fridge, at the life she'd built on silence and fear and the terrible weight of survival. Then she looked at Marcus. "If I do this," she said, "there's no going back." "No," Marcus agreed, "there isn't. Dixon will destroy me. He'll try." "And you think a bunch of bikers and 1 state police sergeant can stop him?" Marcus thought about Sergeant Owens, her weary eyes and her admission that justice was slow and messy, thought about Jennifer Martinez, still carrying the weight of a fight she'd lost. Thought about Rachel, driven out of town for speaking truth, thought about all the times the system had failed, would fail, might fail again. "I think we can make him answer for it," Marcus said. "Even if we can't make him pay. Even if it takes years. Even if all we get is the truth on record and Dixon sweating through an investigation." He met her eyes. "Sometimes that's enough. Sometimes knowing someone tried is the difference between surviving and giving up." Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Then she picked up the folder. "Okay," she whispered, "I'll do it." The statement took 3 hours. Sergeant Owens arrived with a female detective, setting up at Sarah's kitchen table while Razor and the brothers formed a perimeter outside. Sarah spoke in a voice that shook at first, then grew stronger, detailing incidents, dates, the progression from inappropriate comments to casual violence to outright threats. Betty corroborated everything, adding her own history. Marcus watched from the doorway, not part of the official process, but present as a reminder that Sarah wasn't alone. When it was done, Owens stood and shook Sarah's hand. "This is going to get worse before it gets better. Dixon will hear about this by morning. He'll deny everything, claim you're lying, bring pressure. Are you prepared for that?" Sarah glanced at her daughter's door. "I'm prepared to stop lying." Owens nodded. "We'll have a protective detail here by midnight. And, Mr. Webb," she turned to Marcus, "thank you for not letting this die quietly." After the police left, Sarah made coffee for the brothers' rotating watch. Her daughter emerged from her room, took one look at the bikers, and asked in a small voice, "Are they here to keep us safe?" "Yeah, baby," Sarah said. "They are." The girl thought about this, then walked up to Razor's 6 feet of weathered muscle and ink and said, "Thank you." Razor smiled, the kind that crinkled his eyes. "Just doing what's right, little miss." Marcus stepped outside, needing air. He found Sarah on the porch a few minutes later, wrapped in a sweater against the night chill. "I've been thinking about what happens next," she said. "The investigation, the trial, if it gets that far. The town turning against me, losing my job. She looked at him, and I realized something. What's that? I've already lost everything that matters if I keep being afraid. She smiled, tired but genuine. At least this way, my daughter sees me fight. Marcus nodded. For what it's worth, I think you're braver than you know. I think I didn't have a choice. Sarah's smile faded. But that's not quite true, is it? You gave me a choice. Most people just tell you what to do or walk away. You stayed and let me decide. It had to be your decision. Why? Would have been easier to just push me into it. Easier doesn't mean right. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the brothers move through their rotation, professional and focused. What happens to you now? Sarah asked. After this, do you go back to California? Marcus thought about that. About the road waiting, the club, the life he'd built from wreckage and second chances. Eventually, he said, but I'll stay until this settles. Make sure you're safe. And then I ride. He smiled slightly. That's what I do. Must be lonely. Sometimes, but it's honest. Sarah looked at him for a long moment. I think you're running from something, and I think you stopped here because you finally found something worth running toward. Before Marcus could respond, his phone buzzed. Owens. Dixon's been informed. He's lawyered up. Investigation is official. Stay vigilant. Marcus showed Sarah the message. She read it and nodded slowly. So it begins. Yeah. You scared? Terrified, Marcus admitted, but that's never stopped me before. Sarah laughed, a real laugh, the first he'd heard from her. Well, at least we're terrified together. 3 months later, Marcus stood outside the county courthouse, watching news vans pack up their equipment. The investigation had moved faster than anyone expected. Owens had been thorough. Betty's testimony had opened floodgates. 4 more women came forward, then 6, then 10, a pattern so clear even Dixon's lawyers couldn't obscure it. The trial was still months away. But Dixon was no longer sheriff. Suspended, pending review. His deputies under investigation, his dynasty cracking at the foundations. Sarah emerged from the courthouse, her daughter holding her hand. The bruises had faded. Something harder had taken their place. How do you feel? Marcus asked. Exhausted, Sarah said, relieved, terrified about what comes next. She smiled, alive. Her daughter tugged her hand. Mom, the man from the news wants to ask you questions. Tell him maybe later, baby. The girl ran off. Sarah watched her go with an expression. Marcus recognized the fierce protectiveness of someone who'd fought for every inch of peace. I got a job offer, Sarah said. 2 counties over. Better pay. Health insurance. Start next month. That's good. It's because of you, because you didn't let this go. It's because you had the courage to speak. We're both right. Sarah looked at him. You leaving soon? Tomorrow morning. She nodded, not surprised. Where to? Wherever the road goes. That's cryptic. That's honest. Sarah smiled. Well, if the road ever brings you back this way, you've got friends here. Weird leather-wearing, fiercely protective friends. But friends. I'll remember that. She hugged him, brief, tight, sincere. Then she walked away, her daughter running back to meet her, both of them moving toward whatever came next. Marcus stood watching until they disappeared into the parking lot. Razor pulled up on his bike. Ready, almost. Marcus took one last look at the courthouse, at the town that had tried to bury truth and found out that sometimes someone refuses to let it stay buried. He thought about Jennifer Martinez, who'd kept evidence as insurance and found redemption in someone else's fight. About Betty, who carried shame for 10 years and found strength in community. About Sarah, who'd survived by staying quiet and discovered that speaking could be survival too. About all the women who'd come forward, who'd found each other in the wreckage, who'd built something like justice from the pieces. And about himself, a man who'd spent years running from his own capacity for violence, who'd found a way to channel fury into something that wasn't destruction. This wouldn't be the last town with a corrupt sheriff. Wouldn't be the last woman who needed someone to stand witness. Wouldn't be the last fight against power that protected itself. But it was one fight won, and sometimes that had to be enough. Marcus started his bike. "Where to?" Razor asked. Marcus thought about the road ahead, about the next town, the next person who needed help, the next moment where he'd have to choose between riding past or stopping. "Don't know yet," he said, "but I'll figure it out when I get there." They rode out together, leather and chrome, and the quiet power of men who'd learned that real strength wasn't domination. It was protection. It was standing between the innocent and the wolves. It was refusing to be part of the silence. Behind them, the town settled into its new reality, uncomfortable, uncertain, but cleaner than it had been. And in a small house on the edge of town, a little girl finished her homework and asked her mother a question. Why did those men help us? Sarah thought about Marcus, about the choice he'd given her, about the brothers who'd stood watch while justice figured itself out. "Because that's what good people do," she said. "When they see something wrong, they don't look away. Even when it's scary, especially when it's scary." The girl considered this. "Then I want to be like that when I grow up." Sarah smiled and pulled her daughter close. "Yeah," she whispered, "me too. If you believe that silence is complicity, that power without accountability is tyranny, and that sometimes the most important thing we can do is refuse to look away, then this story is for you." The fight for justice isn't glamorous. It's slow, messy, and often feels hopeless. But it's also necessary, and it starts with ordinary people making extraordinary choices to stand up when it's easier to stay seated. What choice will you make? If this story made you think, made you feel, or made you want to be braver, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And if you know someone who needs to hear that speaking up matters, share this with them. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay compassionate, and never stop fighting for what's right.